Okay, so what we talked about last time is we looked at the different types of bias. So we talked about bias is the idea of basically messing up your results some way or another. The main one we talked about is if we were to leave out part of the population when we were selecting our sample, that would lead to a sample that is not representative of the population. That's only really important if the people that we're leaving out differ from those who we are including. And then we looked at the sampling types. So we talked about there is a simple random sample, and then besides that, stratified and cluster sample. Last thing we talked about is this idea of sampling variability, which just says when we take a sample, each sample is going to be a little bit different. And that's just because we're all different as individuals. Okay. So leaving off, what is the benefit of increasing sample size? Increasing sample size is going to give us increased precision. So what I mean by that is we are going to have less variability or a smaller margin of error. So we talked about this idea with sampling variability up above is oftentimes what you're going to be doing is you're going to have some estimate and you're going to be adding or subtracting a margin of error. So it's going to give you ultimately a range of plausible values. So if we have a bigger sample size, we're going to have a smaller margin of error, which will give us a smaller range. The big thing that is really important is increasing sample size does not increase accuracy. So taking a bigger sample does not make it more accurate. If you have bias, the only way to correct for bias is to fix your design. So the only way to correct bias is to fix or adjust your design. Taking a bigger sample is not going to affect bias. Okay, sampling frame. This is vocabulary. It is just a list of all individuals. Sam, can you open the door, please? In the population. A list of all the individuals in the population. And remember, we talked about last time, your population is not necessarily like everyone in the world. It's whoever you care about. So if I want to know the average amount of time that seniors spend on homework, my population is only seniors. It's not all students. And it could be seniors in Prospect. It could be seniors in 214. It's whoever I'm interested in. So that is your sampling frame. Okay. Under coverage. So this is a big word that you are going to see. Under coverage is leaving out some part of the population when choosing your sample. So a very common example is when we take a survey by cell phone. So we call up people randomly and ask their opinion on something. If I do a survey by cell phone, who am I leaving out? People without phones. That is only an issue if the people without phones differ from the people who do have phones with regard to what we're studying. If I'm studying favorite color, is there reason to believe that people who don't have a cell phone differ from those who do with regard to favorite color? If I am studying highest level of education, is there reason to believe people who don't have a phone might differ from those who do with regard to level of education? Okay, best way to explain that is to give a so what. So could somebody give me an example for how they might differ, those two groups? Kiara?
They both have to do with the resources available to you. So if you have more like economic means, then you're both more likely to have a phone and more likely to have higher education.
Exactly. So we just have to argue it's possible people who don't have phones have potentially a lower mean. Maybe they didn't get as high of a level of education, so they can't afford a cell phone. It is really important that you give direction here. So for the example with highest level of education, we are likely to overestimate highest level of education because we are leaving out potentially lower levels of education. Okay. Two other things, non-response bias. This is when we choose individuals for the sample but some people don't respond. This is kind of related to voluntary response bias, but they're not the same. The issue is still the same, though. Like, what is the problem? The problem is that people who care tend to respond. So we are generally only going to get the people who care really strongly about whatever the issue is that we're asking. The people who don't respond generally don't care. So we're going to overrepresent the people who do care one way or another. Okay, it is different from voluntary response, though. Non-response is we've chosen people, they didn't respond. Voluntary response, on the other hand, is we throw out the survey and we will take anyone who responds. So voluntary response is we accept anyone who responds. It's still the same issue, though. The issue is still the people who respond tend to care more. And so we are going to overrepresent whatever issue they care about. To reduce non-response bias, you're going to need to follow up with the people. Taking another survey is not going to do anything because there's an issue with our design. So either follow up with the people who didn't respond, maybe you offer them money of some kind.
I did a Chick-fil-A survey recently because they offered a free chicken sandwich.
Okay, there we go.
Just thought I'd connect it.
Okay, is that non-response bias or voluntary response?
Voluntary.
Voluntary, right? Because it's probably a thing like the bottom of every receipt if you take our survey, right? So they'll accept anybody who gives that survey or responds to their survey, and probably it's people who just want free stuff. Do you think people are taking that survey really seriously? Probably not. But maybe. I bet you did, though.
So serious.
Great. Okay, I want to write down this last one and then talk about one example, and then we're done. Response bias. Response bias is anything that influences a person's response. So some examples. Question wording. The characteristics of the interviewer. Just human nature. Anonymity. Etc. So I'm going to give us a few different examples. Question wording. If I asked you, should we have a bigger parking lot? Yes or no? Okay, you would answer one way or another. Now, would your answer potentially change if I said something like, should we increase the size of the parking lot if you know that it's going to double the cost of a parking permit? Is that going to influence the way you answer? For sure. Characteristics of the interviewer. A lot of times you guys do surveys about like drug and alcohol use. Would you answer differently if you knew that I was the one who was collecting your responses? Maybe, I don't know. Those are kind of the big ones. Questions for me? I need us to do a really good job on this homework. I am going to grade it. I have one example that I would like to talk about, but we're not going to write it down. So what I'm going to tell you right now is you have a minute to pack up your stuff, and then we're going to talk about the last example that I want to talk about.